8:30, I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Economic Development Authority to order. I would be looking to start with approval of the agenda. We are going to switch items 4 and 5 around on the agenda to be cognizant of Chris's time, who joined us via web. So with that change, I'd look for a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ken. Do we have a second? Second from Andy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Agenda passes. We'll move on to approval of the May 20th County EDA meeting minutes. Everybody should have had those in their packet. I'd be looking for a motion to accept those as presented or any amendments.
I'll make that motion.
Motion from Rayanne. Do I have a second? Second from Andy. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
I'll abstain.
Ken abstains because he was not present. So we have unanimous with one abstention. That passes. Now we'll move on to the new item number 4, which is county broadband update, and Dan will kick us off here.
Yeah, through the month of May, the county commissioners issued a broadband study to both residents and businesses, and Chris from Finley Engineering gave us a report on Tuesday to the county board with the report. I did include a summary of or actually the full report in your packet, and Chris has graciously offered to also give us a summary today. So Chris, are you on? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Perfect.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, I'll just kind of start off. Dan approached us to do some kind of updates on the state of broadband, and I guess I could probably share my screen if you guys can see that. And I'll just be referencing the report mostly and running off the maps there. So no big deal if you can't see it, if you've got it in your packet there.
We can see it, Chris.
Perfect. Let's see if I can get rid of that, or at least move it. There we go. So, basically the study had 2 parts. One was some mapping analysis, and the other part was a survey. When it comes to, broadband feasibility studies and trying to estimate, where you guys or any entity, government, what have you, is at with service. We're finding that the mapping is becoming more and more valuable to just kind of get a picture of what's going on, and that has to do with a couple of different factors. Number one is broadband used to be kind of siloed into these, telephone exchanges and service areas. That was deregulated in the late 90s, early 2000s, and since then, broadband's kind of been a free for all as far as where providers can and can't go. Um, the other thing is there's been so many funding programs in recent memory that there's just a lot of pockets and fracturing of, larger areas like a county, that makes it really hard to get a handle on what things look like. So to start off with the mapping, we looked at, first thing we always look at is telephone exchanges. This is kind of somewhat of a dinosaur, but it gives us an idea of where things are. You'll see in this map that Sherburne County is kind of unique in that there's no local independent providers. Minnesota is very fortunate to have a lot of small independent providers, be it privately owned or cooperatives that have built a lot of fiber and are really, bringing that long-term fiber optic connectivity to rural Minnesota. Um, Unfortunately, you guys have, the big 3 in Minnesota that have not really done that and really relied on legacy DSL services in the area. That being said, there are a few cable companies um, in the county, in Midco and Charter, I believe, and also you've got Arvig kind of pushing in there and doing some fiber projects here and there. So you'll see on this map that the green is CenturyLink, the red's Frontier, and the blue is Windstream. Moving on through the report, we kind of talk about different sources of data, and then I believe we get to a list of providers here on page 6, and that is every registered provider in the state and what they offer as far as service and what their maximum advertised service is. That's not to say that they can deliver that everywhere, but that's just what their best effort is. So you'll see a lot of, um, kind of marginal speeds on DSL, and even the ones that are there, those are probably grossly overstated. 200 by 200 megabit service is very difficult to do on copper DSL. You would need to have multiple bonded pairs and very short loops, technical stuff that I won't bore you with in the limited time we have. Um, as far as trying to gauge, where those services are, there's two major sources we look at. Number one is the FCC, and the second one is the state. Um, I'll talk about the FCC first and how that's different from the state, and then we'll kind of go into the state numbers later. The FCC data, much like the state data, is self-reported. It's a twice yearly reporting. Usually, it's June and December that data gets reported to the FCC, and there's a couple. It's all in census block format, so that's kind of all these odd square type shapes you see here. Those are all individual census blocks. Um, the providers report the maximum advertised service in any census block. So what that means is if I've got 50 people in a census block or 50 homes, and I have one that can get 100 megabit service, but the rest of them can only get 5 or 10, I can report that as 100 megabit service, and it causes a lot of issues because um, when it comes to grant funding and certain programs that use this data to determine what is and isn't eligible, there's been a lot of partially served census blocks that have gotten left behind because there's one or two spots that get service and the rest don't, and some of these census blocks can be pretty big. And when you think about the limitations of copper DSL, we probably estimate that you're quarter to half a mile to serve a 25.3 service on a typical fiber back DSL node. you know, there's a lot of people that could be left behind in that scenario. Uh, so we took this data, we parsed it out into these speed tiers. So kind of the gray and blue are what we would call served, and then the yellow and red would be um, unserved and underserved, and that follows the state definition. Um, we tried to group things in the state definition so that when we show you the state data, we can kind of apples to apples it as much as we can. Um, those are recognized benchmarks at both the state and the federal level. That 25.3, 100 by 20, and the gigabit or 1,000 megabit by 500. Um, and then just to explain those numbers a little bit further, when we say 25 by 3 service or that 25-3, that's a download speed and an upload speed. So when you're watching Netflix, you're taking traffic down from the internet. That's the 25 number. That's download. When you're sending a video or a file to someone else, that's upload speed. Um, a lot of legacy technology, such as copper DSL, coax, cable, broadband service, and even fixed wireless, they really struggle to deliver that upload service, and that's mostly by design. Until recently, we haven't seen a huge demand for upload service, and even now, if you look at say provider A has 5,000 customers on their network, the traffic coming into the network vastly outnumbers the traffic going back up to the rest of the internet. And really what that's from is people consume more than they push back up. However, we're seeing that gap close lately. So things like, cloud data services. You might not think that you partake in cloud data services, but if you've got an iPhone and you've got iCloud and your pictures are stored on, you're buying, stuff, data from Apple, every time your phone syncs, that pushes a huge amount of data up. And we can track that through like provider, their bandwidth snapshots. We can see where that data goes. And the corona pandemic very much highlighted this because, things like we're doing right now where I'm sharing my screen with you, that's I'm probably pushing as much or more up right now than I am pulling down. So we don't know what the next killer app might be, but I guess the general trend is that we're seeing upload and download speeds kind of, get more and more on par all the time. And that's why you're seeing a lot of push towards fiber, and people becoming more and more unhappy with services because, A, they're just running out of speed in general, and B, that upload is becoming more and more important all the time. The next thing we'll talk about is we took all those maps above and we ran them against the county GIS data system. So what that allowed us to do was quickly take every possible home location or business location in the city and count it by those speed categories. And so you'll see that organized in this table here. Um, we also did something kind of different where we went back in time to 2015, where you guys had completed your feasibility study, just to kind of show how much broadband has improved in the county to date. So, you know, you can see where you had 10,000 people that were unserved in 2015, and now you've got nearly the same number that have access to gigabit service. So, it shows there has been quite a bit of uh, of progress in just 4 or 5 years. Um, it's kind of good to see that things are going along, but there's still a lot of work to do here. Um, the next set of data that we'll look at is the state data. Uh, I would consider this to be a little more accurate for a couple of reasons. The first of which is that it does not include any wireless service whatsoever. Wireless service is great for, economically serving those that you just can't serve. From a provider standpoint, you can go deploy a fixed wireless network relatively cheaply and get, you know 60, 70, 80% of the people that maybe you couldn't get before on a well-designed system. However, you're always going to have that, you know 5, 10, maybe even up to 20% of people that you just can't reach because at some point there's people that are just in a hole or have too many, tree obstructions, or whatever the case may be. There's always going to be a small amount of people that you just can't get with that higher speed fixed wireless. And a lot of that just has to do with, if you want that, 25, 50, even 100 megabit service on fixed wireless, you have to have what's called line of sight to the tower, meaning that if I'm sitting directly behind the dish on your house, I have to be able to see with my eyeball, what the dish, where the dish is on the other end. And if I can't do that, it's going to degrade the signal, and thus your speed's going to go down. So that is out the door. We don't look at that on the state data. The other thing that makes this more accurate is the providers are encouraged to put in actual shape files. They're not limited to census block level reporting. So, how we said that, if one gets it, they can report the whole census block. That's not the case here. And so what you'll see is you'll see a lot more unserved and underserved locations on this map than you would on the other. And I think it paints a little more accurate picture. Um, The other thing that I'll point out about this map is a lot of times when we look at a map like this for a county, there's very broad sections of haves and has nots. Talking with Doug, and we talked about this at the county meeting on Tuesday, but this is probably one of the more segmented and disjointed pictures we've seen when it comes to looking at county on a or broadband at a county level. And a lot of that's driven by, you've got legacy providers that are just relying on DSL, and then you've got, CLEC or competitive companies coming in like Arvig and the cable companies, and they're just picking off little pockets of people where they can kind of hit I need to be able to serve people at a X dollars per location to be profitable. So you kind of it's a very muddied picture, and it's hard to assemble large scale projects when you have something like this. Um, so that's kind of where things are today. We also did a table here and counted against the same address point data as we did on the FCC. So you know, based on this picture, we estimate there's about 3,500 locations, or roughly, 10% of the locations in the county could really use some help when it comes to broadband.
Hey, Chris, this is Laura from Arvig. On those address points for the unserved and underserved, have you given those to the GIS, or can I get somehow a WAV file for showing which address points those are?
Absolutely. Whatever, that I will give them to whoever the county directs me to, and whatever format, we operate in Esri. So if you want a shape file, a KMZ, just a paper map, you let me know, and we'll make it happen.
Okay, KMZ would be great for me, but whatever, Dan, they have GIS too, so I think everybody would benefit from seeing that.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. So moving on to where things are kind of headed in the future. One thing we'll want to talk about is the RDOF, or the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Um, there's a lot of words and data here that you guys can read through, but I want to just get to the map. Well, first we'll talk about this. There was 3 winners in the county. Uh, Windstream with 10 locations, Midco with 1,855 locations, and LTD Broadband with 653 locations. Um, this is the map of where those providers are. This Windstream thing is really odd, um, because all of these providers have to provide service at a gigabit level within 6 years. And I don't know how you could justify just rolling out a fiber to the home project for 10 people on the outskirts of Zimmerman, but that's kind of small potatoes when we're looking at the big picture for the county. Um, to talk about the auction in general, when we say it's an auction, all these blocks you see, those are census blocks again. Those were areas that, based on 477 mapping, were determined to not have access to 25x3 service. So they went into this auction pool. They were organized into what's called block groups. So you couldn't just, it's probably a little hard to see, but this is a census block, this is a census block, this is a census block. And they were organized into larger block group bidding packages. And then the auction, it's technically a reverse auction. It would start at some artificially high number, and then through successive rounds, that number would be lowered until there was a single bidder left, and they would be awarded that amount of support over 10 years to facilitate broadband infrastructure in those areas. Uh, there's a lot of controversy about this auction that we get into in the report. Most of it stems around, there's companies like Windstream and Frontier that were allowed to bid in this thing that that were going through bankruptcy at the time. And then you've also got players like LTD who, have a limited, they're a very large fixed wireless provider. However, to my knowledge, they have limited or no fiber to the home services today. Um, and companies like that were allowed to bid at the gigabit tier uh, with with limited experience like that, and also there's other companies that bid the same tier with fixed wireless. And while you can do gigabit on fixed wireless, the ability to scale that and serve large rural areas like this is very much in question. Um, to my knowledge, there's not really a product on the market that can reliably do that today, and it's probably some years away. So right now where we're at with this is all the providers are, the auction's done. These are the preliminarily awarded blocks. Right now, they've submitted what's called a long form. So that's a more detailed technical document that shows, here's how we would feed given areas. Here's what we're using for, overall network technology at the last mile, meaning, from the last piece of equipment to the home itself. Middle mile, connecting multiple sites of kind of last mile electronics. And then upstream, which is, here's how we connect to larger internet facilities in Minneapolis, Omaha, Fargo, places like that. um, there's also a financial aspect to that, and the reason I bring that up is LTD was the biggest winner in the US in the whole auction itself. Um, so there's and a lot of areas were bid down to extremely low levels, like 1% of the total service. And there's a lot of hometown electric or hometown broadband and electric co-ops that have a 10-20 year horizon on payback on these things, and they couldn't hang in there and bid against them. So there's a lot of question about how is this financially viable for a company that's that small. Um, the long and the short of it is kind of stay tuned, because there's a lot of money out there for broadband right now. However, those programs are not allowing you to apply for funding in these areas. So, um, unfortunately, a lot of these areas are going to be put on hold until there's a little more clarity, which probably won't come for another year or two. So that is RDOF. Doug was not available to be here today, so I'll kind of just briefly touch on the survey. Um, so I believe they did a survey, and it was both a household and a business survey. Um, one of the odd things that came out of the survey that there was a high abandonment rate at 43%. Uh, I believe they typically run around 15 to 20% for abandonment, and what that means is people get online and they sign up and start it, and they maybe answer one question and they leave. So it's just a super odd thing, and we're not really sure why that might happen. Um, a few other highlights from the study: 96% said they had some sort of broadband, but I think a lot of them. Where am I at here? I got to look at my numbers. I'm not as fluent as as Doug is. Um, and 86% of respondents said that they had somebody that used the internet to work from home. 44% of that, so nearly half of that was full time. And that's probably a little artificially high with the pandemic. So I mean, we see a lot of people, and we don't know where that number might go, because we had a big surge of people working online the last year, but a lot of those are starting to go back, and some of them may never go back. There's a lot of businesses that are continuing to offer the ability to work from home. That's kind of a trend we're seeing nationwide. Only 25% of respondents said they were satisfied with what they were paying for and the speeds they were paying for. And 43% said they were downright unhappy with the speeds at home. So I think it kind of shows that there is some general sense of dissatisfaction with service in the county today, and 55% said they supported the concept of a new fiber broadband network in the county, and 43% said they might support the idea but needed more information. Typically, those are numbers that we would expect. A lot of people are just kind of skeptical when this survey comes from a county, and there's a lot of people that have very well set in stone opinions, I'll call it, on the role of county government and broadband and that sort, and just their lives in general. Let's see. 61% said that they would definitely buy service from a new high-speed network, and another 25% said they probably would. So I think that's a pretty good indicator, that tracks with the rest of the numbers that we're seeing. And let's see. And then I think the last thing to touch on is Doug said, is that we did do a business survey, but we didn't really get a very high take for that. So that's something that we may want to reopen or come back around to and try to get a better response on that. So yeah, that's kind of my quick and fast summary of the report. It's 35 pages, so I don't want to sit here and read it word for word, but I'll gladly entertain questions at this time, or touch back on anything you want to go into a little more depth.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions?
I'm curious to get Laura's feedback.
I think, the RDOF thing, everyone would like that taken care of as soon as possible, just so we can get moving, because I hate to see that drag out for another year or two. If those are people we can use with the ARP money, I think everyone would agree with that. We want to get that moving as quick as possible. So, but yeah, no, I think, from what I've seen of the map, I would agree with a lot of those areas. I think, Chris would say that too, Frontier and CenturyLink and Windstream, and they all grossly overstate what they're giving the customers for speed, and I think we all agree the maps are not consistent. So I was a little disappointed that the survey people maybe didn't share a little bit more information of where they lived. I think that would have been a big benefit for us, just knowing, where those people are. So
Chris, can you talk to that point of why that wasn't included in the survey, locations? Or is that more?
Sure. So that is an option that we can do. We could host a geocoded survey, and we could link them to like an Ookla speed test server and gather that data. That was an option that we chose not to go after. I believe it's because of the RBC site, and there is some data there, and that's already set up and free. So for those reasons, we did not go down that road. But that's something that's open in the future, I would say.
I think, Dan, one thing so with Midco's RDOF sections here, 25% of it looks like it's going to be
Yeah, Chrissy's gonna bring up a map here. The bottom one, Chrissy. There you go.
Yep.
So this matches the RDOF with the state underserved map. And we put where the red is where the county currently has conduit. For those of you that don't know, when we do road projects, we often put conduit into the ground. And it's being filled by fiber providers, we lease that back to a fiber provider. So that's the red lines on there. The yellow is proposed where Andrew and the public works staff think they can put additional conduit that would qualify for the ARPA dollars. That's the new federal recovery dollars. And then we also have some areas in blue that would not qualify for ARPA because they're not in the blue underserved areas, but we think would make sense to put conduit in as well. So yeah, a lot of the underserved is part of the RDOF if you look at this map.
Well, yeah, and the point I was getting at there is probably 25% of Midco's RDOF wins is proposed to be XL solar field.
Oh,
And I'd imagine XL's probably gonna run their own. And that's the other thing in looking at underserved or unserved, it doesn't take into account XL's private network, which is another, giant chunk of land that's blue on this map. But, I mean, we all know where it is and we all know where the refuge is, but
And I had talked to Dan, and I think, we worked with GIS last week, and I asked them to plot all of the GIS for the address points there, where there's actually homes. Because I think exactly what you said, some of those areas that I looked at too, when we were trying to do something last year, there's like 5 houses or 2 houses, or, it's a field,
Yeah.
it's an address, but there's nothing there.
yeah, and we all kind of know where it is. The Midco RDOF victory one is the one that we might want to, because I would assume that Midco's not going to bother with it once they realize that's what it's going to be. If they didn't know there'd be no point. Because Excel will run its own private fiber to all those, anything they need on those fields.
that's
So,
a good point.
but just something to maybe have that conversation with Excel, just so we know. But
And Rayanne, you had asked a question on Tuesday about dark fiber that's in the ground that's not being utilized.
Yes.
I know Arvig owns a lot of Windstream's dark fiber. How does that fit into the whole picture?
Well, we call it the transport fiber. That's how we get around the state, moving our traffic. And, a lot of it wasn't built for residential. Arvig does a lot of towers as well. So if you look at our fiber map, we do a ton of towers. We do or I think we're up to 400 schools and libraries. So it just depends on some of those situations where we maybe put in like a 288 count fiber strand, and 6 of it might be for that dark fiber customer or whatever. So it really kind of depends. We have to really look at it with engineering to see which areas we can utilize that. So we can break into that strand of fiber, and we can add pond cabinets, and we can add slack. It just depends on where it's at in the network. And so some of that we use it for diversity as well. So if there's a fiber cut, we can instantly reroute traffic so people aren't down. And I think that was when Arvig purchased that a year and a half ago. That was kind of the intention with some of that, is we already had a lot of existing fiber network, but we wanted.
Did you get it all from Windstream when you did that? Like in big
The
ones,
records
for
were a little
example?
sketchy, but we actually, I think, hired 3 or 4 of the Windstream employees. So now we have extra, because they know the network.
Understand where it's at.
Yeah, so now we have a lot better, so we've been utilizing it now in the last year. In the first 6 months, we didn't really have many records from them to know what we actually all got with it, but now that we've cut those employees.
Because it was my understanding when it wasn't Windstream and it was prior.
Shell.
Yeah, that they were very forward thinking and really did a lot of infrastructure investment in fiber.
They did.
And unfortunately got picked up by a company that, there again, the landmine dollars that the federal government is still paying. And that's why these companies are here. They're not here to improve us. They're here just to take that money, because they get it for every house that is here, and they get it for every house they put the line to that's being built. And I think at some point we got to figure out how to have that conversation with the state and the federal, that's got to stop. You've got to stop it, giving them the incentive to not do anything. Because when I look at the map, or not the map, but the list of providers in our county, and I look at how many are DSL, which means nothing anymore. And fixed wireless, we all know that, that's a temporary short-term solution, but it isn't what you want to get to in the long run. You want to get to that fiber in the ground. That's the future. And I see very limited fiber. I think, what, 4 companies?
And I think that's all Arvig deploys. We don't do anything else.
Right, and
in
that's
this
what I
area. So I
noticed
think
too.
that's the difference, but I think,
Yes.
we don't get anything, that's why, when you come as the incumbent provider and you come into these areas, that's why the first thing customers, why are you more expensive? Well,
This is-
because it's pure cost on us. We don't get any extra kickback from the government or anything on those lines, so.
Yeah, I get concerned about companies like Skynet, for example, that is trying to do both. I mean, doing both means you're not doing any one of them really well, because you should be focusing on something. And so, like I said, looking at who our providers are, I would like us to focus really on working with the ones that are focused on the fiber. I think that's where we're gonna get our best bang for our buck in the future.
Does anyone have any other questions for Chris on the survey before we let him sign off?
I would just want to chime in with one more thing before I let you guys go. If anybody has a question, I'll gladly take that. You guys are talking a lot about ARPA dollars and trying to inject that, and I think that's a great thought. However, I would just caution you to read through the rules. The Treasury Department released some interim rules a couple of weeks ago on restrictions around those dollars, and I think it's going to limit um, how some of the counties like yourself might be able to use it. Uh, w- it's going to place a lot of restrictions around how these projects get built. So you're going to have to pay federal prevailing wage requirements, which is probably going to bump labor costs somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% up on these projects. So if you're trying to pool multiple resources, that could create issues. Um, there's also going to be some duplication of benefits, and it's not real clear what that means right now because they are just interim rules, and hasn't been a comment Q&A on these yet. But a lot of people are of the opinion that RDOF areas would not be eligible for ARPA dollars, or you would have to prove that you're not kind of double dipping on those funds. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind as well. But I mean, I think it's a great option for counties that are struggling with broadband to. So I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying we gotta make sure that we're doing due diligence with that when it comes to ARPA dollars.
Thanks for that, Chris. Any other questions for Chris? All right, we appreciate your time, Chris. Thanks for signing on for another meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
All right, on that note, if no one's got any other questions on broadband, we can move into our new item 5, which is the county tax abatement policy review.
Yeah, every couple of years, we review the tax abatement policy, and after COVID, I thought we should make some changes. Each tax abatement financing agreement has a jobs requirement attached to it. And we wanted to add some language that made sure those jobs were on site. With so many people telecommuting now, we didn't want them to promise 50 jobs that were in California that they could commute into Sherburne County. So we added a lot of language about the jobs have to be on site. A lot of that is based in the scoring system. Everything in red is all the changes and what was attached. We also added a couple language things. On the scoring system, we did add a lower tier. And the reason we did that is we get a lot of really big projects that have a high property tax, but the economic impact is the #1 scoring system or scoring parameter for these projects. And for instance, a research and development firm has a huge economic impact, but because the property tax is on a firm that big, they didn't qualify for any tax abatement. So we did add a tier on here so they would at least get some points for their economic impacts. They could probably qualify for at least a quarter of the tax abatement. So those are the 2 changes we're recommending, and there was always questions on the infrastructure, item D on the scoring, so Tim and I did change the language to make it a little more clear of what would qualify for those 5 extra bonus points as part of the scoring system. So the EDA is a recommending body to the county board, so if you guys agree to these changes, we would go to the county board for formal adoption. And any future applications that would come in would be under this new policy.
Anyone have questions, comments on the changes?
No, I think all the changes look good. I do question the amount of, reference to job creation in this whole packet though. You know, to the point where we're dictating hourly wages and what benefits companies provide for their employees in order to, legitimize themselves here. The fact of the matter is, job creation is not an issue. And it's a great talking point politically. We hear it every time we turn on the news, from the president to the government down to here. Anytime somebody wants to spend money, it says we're gonna create jobs with this. The fact of the matter is, I know of absolutely no company in Sherburne County that is not looking for employees, right? And truthfully, it's been this way since the mid-90s, other than the 2009, 2010 depression there. So job growth, and from an EDA perspective, where in my mind is based on tax-based property values and incoming taxes, I don't know. I mean, do I really care if somebody's putting up a $20 million building, whether they facilitate their company with 10 employees or 100? I really don't. I want that property value in the county. I want the tax base coming in. And I think it's become such a political fodder to bring in job creation that we do it without even analyzing if it's pertinent anymore.
Yeah, no, that's point well taken, and I think job creation's only part of the formula.
Well, and I do, as I go through this, I do see that actually in the point system, it is a relatively small part of the scoring, so I do take that into account. But the verbiage is still pretty heavily through this. So I wouldn't want people not to apply if it's truly needed because of the employment requirements listed in here. Like I said, especially, I don't believe the county should be mandating what health benefits a company provides. In today's market, after the Obamacare changes and things got a little bit weird and crazy, there's so many different types of programs out there that it's hard to even quantify, you know, whether it's an HSA or a full, or, you know, or a lot of companies I know just increased employee wages and said, go buy your own, on the open market. So.
I think, I could be wrong here, Dan, is our policy just dictates a cash wage level, doesn't it?
Correct.
Yeah, I think,
Well, it says here that, retained or newly hired as a direct result of the project, a starting hourly wage including employer-paid health care above the minimum local living wage.
right, and it's just taking that into the total wage amount. It's not dictating that you have to have healthcare, it's just if you pay it.
I see.
So it's a verbiage thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but
Yeah,
that's,
correct.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
and
apologize, I misread that.
It's a website we go to, and I just verify that these jobs meet this minimum qualification that's on this MIT website that they created an update. So it just ensures a living wage, essentially.
Understand.
But I think to Ken's point, if someone is reading through something like this, they might be misled. And like Ken referenced, maybe would not apply then because of how they misinterpreted. Is there a better way we can put the language to be a little more clear?
We can play with that and bring it back next month.
We can take a look at it. And I'd be, and this is just an assumption, I would imagine most of the people don't stumble upon this policy. Most of them are a phone call to you to get it originally. So there's a little softer touch in there than just reading blanket policy, but yeah, I think looking at the language is never a bad thing. It's a tough policy to craft when you want to apply to every type of business and exclude no one at the same time, but absolutely.
And a policy where less is more. So really looking at the redundancies and some of the things that aren't quantifiable in here, I think is, pertinent every so often. When we talk job creation, you can actually, I think the climate out there is changing to the point where the public, who is the other one that we have to sell, why are we using our tax dollars on bringing this in? And so we're saying, well, they're gonna bring in 100 new jobs, and you have a company that says, great, so now we have somebody else to compete with for employees.
I can't find
I haven't
anybody.
been find employees for 10 years, and now you're gonna, so there are some unintended consequences that if the employment situation does not, ease, we could be going back the other way.
And whether it'll be interesting to see if the employment levels are something that's sustained long-term or not. I mean, coming into the pandemic, we were below 4% unemployment to start with, and
Been going on a long time.
Yeah.
Long time. And I think that's why we're not seeing more expansion, because quite honestly, I know a lot of companies that could expand to meet demand, but I'm not gonna invest millions in a new facility if I can't staff. So, and other companies are shutting down certain days just to rest their overworked staff. I mean, this is a real situation, and like I said, it's been going on for, since the mid-90s, so.
It's just getting bigger.
So I think it's just, like I said, job creation, we hear it every night on the news, whether whoever's selling what, whether it's green energy or whatever the case may be, it's all tagged with, we're gonna create 1 million new jobs. Does anybody sit back and go, why? We don't have the employees, so not our source of concern right now, so that's my take on it. But I understand it's a tricky policy.
yeah, no, I definitely appreciate the comments. And the one thing I'd urge, us around this table and anyone that's addressing, public questions as far as why the policy's there, the economic impact portion of it that Dan runs does a good job explaining the story behind why employment numbers are important, right? Tax base is one piece, and that's really easy for us to all quantify and say, this is what they pay in property taxes, this is what it does to the economy. But that, the ancillary benefits of those employees spending money within our local economy at other businesses, moving their families here potentially, things of that nature is what that economic impact study takes into. And that's why we made it kind of a core piece of this new policy, but appreciate the discussion for sure. So do we want to make a motion on the proposed changes to get this clean up to the county board, and then have you and Tim work on any
We can just
language?
table the discussion until next meeting, and Tim and I can clean up the language and bring it back to
You
this
wanna do
group
that?
in a month. There's no rush,
Okay.
yeah.
Is everybody all right with that?
Whatever works best for you guys.
Take another pass at the language? All right.
We can bring it back. I'd like this body to make the recommendation to the board, so let's get it cleaned up before we send it.
All right, sounds good. I don't think we necessarily need a motion to table that.
Okay.
All right,
No action taken.
no action taken, yep. We will move on to item number 6, which is our very own Andy Voller giving a real estate and banking industry update.
Housing market's a little warm.
It was like on fire.
Got some reports from the Minnesota Realtors. So year-to-date, new listings, 42,000 new listings, were down 1.5% over last year. Pending sales are up 37,000 up, so it's up 13.4%. Closed sales, 30,000, up 11.4%. The median sale price has jumped up now to 295,000 year-to-date. To give you an idea, just in May, it was 310, was the median sale price,
That's statewide.
statewide. So I've got some reports, I'll go statewide, regional, and then I've got some specific for Sherburne County too. But I've been in real estate for about 20 years. This is the first time I've ever seen the percent of original list price received year-to-date is at 100.9%. That's up 3.2. So for the month of May, on average, 102.9% is what they were receiving for list price.
So that means, people were bidding, there was a bidding war going on.
Yep. Yeah, actually statistically, the realtors just came out with a new report that said, half of all closed transactions sold over the list price. 30,000 was the median price paid over the list price. 25% of all transactions are closing without an inspection contingency. 60% of all the transactions include multiple offers, and the median number of multiple offers is 8.
Now, in all of those, my question is, how many of, they obviously make it through appraisal. And that's befuddling to me, because it's like, how are they making it through appraisal when the previous comps that you don't really look at for about 18 months or whatever, I just don't get that. Are they
One
coming
of
with
the-
cash to the table?
Yeah,
Yeah, lots of cash.
lots of cash. One of the things at the bank that we are doing a lot of is when people are looking to move, we're actually putting a bridge loan in. So we're putting a line of credit on their current house. You know, when you take a look at what happened back in 2009, 10, about 11, 12, a lot of people were able to refinance down to a 15-year from the 30-year for almost the same payment. So what happens is now all those people are almost paid off on that mortgage. So we're able to go in, give them a line of credit, and then they can now go to that purchase and say it's a cash offer. Because when you're in multiple offers, if you're not a cash buyer, if you're, FHA financing or VA financing where they have to worry about that appraisal, I've
Yeah,
seen
no
a lot of
chance.
situations where they'll take the lower amount just so they don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big things. The month supply. So month supply of inventory statewide, we're at 1.1 month supply of inventory. To give you guys kind of an idea, a seller's market is considered less than 5 months. 5 to 7 months is a balanced market, and then over 7 months would be considered a buyer's market. And for the past 3 months, we've been at 1.1 down to the lowest I've seen statewide was 0.9%. Now, regionally, so the realtors have our region as Stearns, Benton, Sherburne, and Wright County. Regionally, the housing numbers are, the new listings are down 6.2%, so there's only been 3,800 homes listed regionally. And pending sales right now are 3,376 homes. 2,616 are sold. So the sold number went up 10%. Regionally, we are at 294,000 in the median sales price, and the price received to original list is 101.3 year to date. It was 102.9 in May. Year to date, homes have been on the market for an average of 35 days, and the month supply of inventory is 1 month. Now, when we come to Sherburne County, so just Sherburne County, closed sales year-to-date 937, so we're down 7.4%. Closed sales, we're at 587, which is down 1.7%. The median sale price is $319,000, so it's up 18.2% year-to-date over last year. The original list, percent of original list price is 102.3%, so we're up 3.2% on that. But for just the month of May, it was 104.3%. So 4.3% was the average price offered over asking price. And the month supply of inventory for the month of May was 0.9. To give a little bit of an idea, so I ran some numbers yesterday. In Sherburne County, active listings that do not have that are not under contract, so they're not active contingent upon financing or contingent upon inspection or sale of home. So just active, 109 homes. Average list price of the 109 homes is $429,600 or $200 a square foot. Median list price is $399,215 of those homes. So the homes that are currently under contract, there's 387 homes under contract. The average list price of those homes are $354,000. Of the 387 homes that are currently on the market right now, the average days on market was 14.7. And I ran another search. So I searched Sherburne County, all homes that closed within 0 to 30 days. And there were 186 homes that have closed within the past 30 days. So if you think about this, take the 186 homes, which is your absorption rate, that's what's closed. Divide that by about 30, I think it was like 6 something. So that means right now, we have about 17 days worth of inventory in the market, and that's it.
Build more houses, Ken.
Flat more lots.
So
City.
one of the interesting things that we're also looking at, and this is one of the conversations we've had at the bank with regards to what are we doing? There's been a lot of forum or a lot of conversation through the Independent Community Bankers Association about capping loan to values now. Because one of the things that's pushing is there's no foreclosures on the market. So back in early last year with I think it was March or April, they came out with the moratorium. There's a foreclosure moratorium, so any loans that are federally backed, so Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, FHA loans, they have a moratorium where they cannot start a foreclosure process until after, and that moratorium currently ends June 30th. So to give kind of an idea of what those numbers look like, and they spiked up pretty high to where FHA loans had almost 14% of all the loans in delinquencies. Those are coming down now a little bit, but to give you an idea, 4.57% of all conventional loans that are backed by the government are delinquent. 11.67% of all FHA loans are delinquent, and 7.62% of all VA loans are delinquent. And to give you an idea, so what this program did was it said you can go through a forbearance. A forbearance is an agreement not to do something. So a lot of these people are not making their payments, and they're going either 12 or some of them 18 months now. And to give you an idea, the Mortgage Bankers Association surveyed the servicers of all these mortgages, and there were approximately 2.23 million homeowners that were on forbearance plans as of April 25th.
In the nation.
Yep. So the real question is once that information starts trickling down, how much is that supply going to push the prices down on the homes? Because right now, economics, demand is way higher than supply, and it's everybody's getting emotional out there. Commercially, I think the two biggest areas that we get questioned about at the bank the most from our regulators is lodging and restaurants. I think lodging has about a 20% default rate, and a lot of the commercial money-backed securities are getting hit because there are a lot of the multifamily, or there are a lot of the hotel lodging, non-owner occupieds. So they've got delinquency numbers up there, but realistically from aspect of community banks, in the 12 years I've been at the bank in St. Cloud, this is the least number of delinquencies we've had ever. Every Monday morning we would go through a past due. So anybody that is more than 10 days past their past due, they'll get a report and the lenders will start calling on them or talk to them or find out what's going on. Now, mind you, they show up on the report 10 days, but they're not past due until day 15 with the grace period. But we are down, on the last report was a page and a half, and that was it. Now, when I say a page and a half, you gotta remember, there's probably 5 or 6 names on one page, because it has all the loan details, so it's not, so I bet you there was probably 12 or 15 people, and that was it.
But
So-
is that reflective of the ones that are in a forbearance situation as well?
So the forbearance situation is just federally backed
Okay, so that
loans.
just isn't the.
So community
Got it.
banks do not have to go by that same rule. Yeah, it's crazy out there.
Well, and I'm hoping at some point they're just gonna have to take the finger out of the dike and let this thing play out, because they created a situation where people seem to think that, oh, I don't have to pay my mortgage. It's free. No, it's not free. You're gonna have to try to figure out how to crack a nut that you are going to have an owing of 30,000 or something like that all at once. And people just don't thought process that.
I had a phone call from one of my old neighbors down by the cities in Washington County, Big Marine Lake. She wanted me to help her buy a house, one of the neighbors. The house was an original 1-story. They raised it, put a basement under, and the inside was completely gutted. No cupboards, everything was insulated, but no drywall, just the studs. And they were asking $275 for it. Now, it was not on the lake, it was on a little lagoon that goes to the lake. And I told her, I said, I said, to be honest with you, if you really want this house, you should go to the listing agent so they can hug the transaction. That will give you maybe a little bit more leverage. And I talked to her, she's like, yeah, we didn't get it. I looked, it closed on Monday. So it listed for $275, mind you, it's not at $355, $750.
Stick water anywhere near a property.
It's
They lose their
insane.
minds.
But it's also, a lot of these people are getting into this bidding wars to where it's like, you know, you see some of these people at a silent auction where they're like, I'm gonna win. I don't care what I pay now, I'm gonna win. And they're doing that, they're playing that game with housing. It-
Time, Andy, so June 30th, the moratorium goes away.
If they don't extend it.
If they don't extend it, goes away on the 30th. Once that program's taken away, with the foreclosure process and everything that goes into that, what's the average length of time to where that inventory could even start hitting the open market?
In the state of Minnesota, you're probably looking at 9 to 12 months.
Okay.
So like Wells Fargo, there's an article, Wells Fargo said they are not going to start foreclosure on anyone until at least 2022. Bank of America, Chase, they'll be a little bit different. But so in the state of Minnesota, how it would work is come the 1st, their payments would be due. So say they don't do anything. On July 30th, they would be 30 days past due. You would have to give them a demand letter to demand it. They have 30 days to cure that demand letter. So now you're at August 1st, you're at September 1st. You'll start the initial foreclosure proceedings. Most of them are gonna go foreclosure by advertisement, which means that you're gonna just advertise in the paper. You have to advertise for a minimum of 6 weeks. So now you're looking, say, another 2 months after that. So you're September 1st, October, November. You're into December before the foreclosures start happening. And then it's a 6-month statutory redemption period after that.
For the person that won the bid on the property.
Yep.
So basically a 9-month minimum, and that's kind of what I thought.
9
I
months,
couldn't
yep.
quite
And one of
remember.
the things that a lot of financial institutions are also gonna have to watch is if these were transactions, and if you've paid down more than 40% of the balance of your loan, the statutory redemption period goes from 6 months to 12 months. So,
That's gonna impact property taxes with homes going up 18% in Sherburne County. Commercial properties are not going up 18%, so there's gonna be a shifting of who's paying what. Probably a rather drastic shifting, who's paying what. As their portion of the pie goes up.
Lots more why'd my property taxes go up conversations.
We'll have John in again?
All right, any other questions for Andy? Appreciate the time and effort put into that, Andy. Thank you.
Very informative too.
All
I mean, I
right,
think we all
Could
knew
you give a
something,
report
that
on
it was
construction
coming.
next month? We're gonna try to have you guys talk a little bit. See if we can listen.
all right. So that being said, if there's not any other business that anyone wants to discuss, we can go ahead and adjourn this. Our next meeting is July 15th. Same time.
Same time. Then the board meeting will be right after.
Board meeting's after. Okay. All right. So July 15th, and I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.